Hello, everyone. I'm Jeanene Wolfe, your host of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I wanted to let you know that I'm taking a break for a few weeks, and episodes will be resuming on September 26th. I'm lining up some new speakers, have some new exciting things to share with you in this upcoming season, and I also will be resuming my fictionalized case consultation groups where we discuss fictionalized cases in a consultation group format. If you're interested in participating in those, please check the show notes for the link to subscribe. I'm looking forward to all the exciting things I have planned for you, and I appreciate your loyal listenership. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Today, we will move on to part 2 of our case involving 2 clients who are potentially related. Listen in as we discuss how to manage this case if working with both clients is becoming problematic. Just to throw this out there, if something were to make you think, okay, I've reached a point where I really need to know this, does anyone, Lisa, have any thoughts, or anyone else have any thoughts about, without revealing, without violating confidentiality? You can't say hey, so-and-so your daughter, because you're not technically supposed to even reveal that you know that person. So how would you go about investigating this if you felt the need? Do you have thoughts about that, Lisa, or anyone else?
I might just say, just for clarification in my mind, can you tell me the names of your kids so I can kind of keep track of who you're talking about? Sometimes I'll, just play it that way, to get a little more information, but not look like I'm totally probing. What's your daughter's name?
Right.
Yeah. Maybe I'd do it like that. I don't know.
Okay. And I think a genogram would be helpful. That's another way of getting to it. And that would help you get some clarification about what issues they actually, sort of re-clarifying what issues they want to work on. And I think too, Marla, you asked about, with those names being the biopsychosocial, I worked in intensive in-home, and we got every detail about the whole family when we were assessment was just huge. And my assessment in private practice doesn't look like that at all. It's not nearly as invasive, honestly, as that particular biopsychosocial that we used to do for intensive in-home. But then, then like you said, Lisa, it might be something to think about just in terms of when you're doing your intake, getting maybe a few more clarifying details, or maybe when I do my intake, that kind of thing. That's what kind of popped into my head. Am I asking for enough information?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first thought
I think also, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, actually, when you brought up the slip bio, now I'm thinking, oh God, maybe I need to revamp
yeah, but I'm a huge fan of a genogram, and so that's something that I use with. I'm at least doing it in my head with all of my clients, quite frankly, and then sometimes we'll do it as an intervention or assessment tool.
Yeah. And I think as we talk about this, what's coming back to really my head is really the initial intention of why do you need it, or, to know this information? Because now I'm thinking, if there's no issues with each person in therapy, and it's client centered, and you are practicing with them solely, when you do in fact get this information, why is this relevant? How is it going to really affect your therapeutic process with the client to know this information when it's really not a problem at the moment? If I'm making sense,
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So now now you have the information. How is that going to affect you as a therapist with each of these individuals?
So for me, I agree with that. If I could trust myself not to accidentally slip up some way, form, or fashion, because right now it doesn't appear that there's any reason, there's no overlap in their issues at all. And if I was able to identify through a genogram, which I think is a great idea, I used to do that all the time. That's totally slipped from my repertoire.
It happens.
But I'm afraid that, that what if I accidentally said something I wasn't supposed to know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I've broken confidentiality, and then I don't even know how I would come back from that without making everything worse. And just,
So let's look at it from that perspective then. The therapist themselves is uncomfortable for their own ability to maybe be objective and maintain confidentiality. So what is the next step? So now you know, like, okay, I need to know this because I'm going to need to make a decision as the therapist that makes sure that I'm doing the work appropriately. What is the next step in trying to figure this out?
It kind of piggybacks on what we're just talking about as far as her trusting herself, but being that you have a relationship with each one differently, you know what it feels like as things unfold with each person. And maybe there's one of the two that you feel like naturally it's going to lead there a little bit more than the other, kind of like when we meet with different family members of a family therapy or individually with a couple. Sometimes you just know that when you're in that space one-on-one, that something is going to unfold a little bit more naturally and more comfortably or whatnot with that person per se. So maybe it's just kind of assessing a little bit more of the relationship that you have with each one of them and seeing what kind of naturally unfolds within the process. So trusting the process, I guess, with each one of them too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so then we end up hitting up two different scenarios. One is they both know they're seeing you and they didn't want you to know because they're afraid you won't see them both. And the other is neither one of them knows that they're both seeing you. And so I think along with, is Eleni, is that how you pronounce it?
Eleni, yes, thank you.
Eleni. So what she's saying is then, can you delve a little deeper, say with mom and say, it would be helpful to know more about your kids. And if the mom knows you're seeing her daughter, she might say, all right, the jig is up, like you're seeing my daughter, and then you can figure it out. If she's giving you information that's sort of clarifying in your mind they are related, but they are not indicating that they know they're both seeing you, then you would have to make the choice, I think, and I'm open to other people's thoughts of, do I need to refer one of them out? Do I need to say to one of these two people, I have recently realized that I have a conflict of interest, and so therefore I'm going to need to refer you out. So who do you refer out? So any thoughts along those lines?
That is a position I do not want to be in.
Yeah.
Having to pick which one, especially if they end up knowing that I was seeing them both. Oh gosh. Unless I guess another option would maybe be to refer them both out, which I don't even know if that's a valid option, but just to keep it on an even playing field so not one doesn't think I actually prefer one person over the other.
Right. And so if they reveal that, yes, we're mother-daughter and we both want to see you, that gives you an opportunity to do some boundary setting. Okay, we're gonna have to set parameters around the things that we can work on together. So if the issue starts becoming between the two of you, that's gonna change the way I can work with both of you. And then you would have to have a conversation and explore options. And again, there's no one right answer for that. There's lots of different ways to look at that, and people are complex, so they might have thoughts about it. And needing to refer someone out, or if you felt most comfortable referring them both out, both of those options are okay. I did a training recently on the ethics of referrals. And what it came down to was basically, we have the right to refer out somebody as long as we do it appropriately. So, and it helps if you have in your informed consent, and clearly we can't put all the nuances we might encounter in a case in our informed consent. But it might be a line along the lines of, if at any time I'm no longer able to work with you and there's a variety of reasons this could happen, then I would refer you out, and this is how I would do that. And so I think a lot of us are fearful of making those referrals because, again, that's not an area where we're given a lot of training in. And so we feel insecure about it. And so that's why I took that training specifically, because that comes up all the time. So just having that confidence, Lisa, that as long as you are protecting the client and their needs and giving them, I was not trained this in school, but the general consensus seems to be 3 appropriate referrals, when you're explaining to them why and you're giving them some transition, then it's okay to refer people out. It's not going to be, they're not going to probably like it, but it's not going to be harmful per se. You're not abandoning them.
And it's possible that she could work with both of them, possibly. It's hard. Yep. It's harder to imagine that versus the referral piece, most likely. But there are those surprising cases where is able to stay clean, I think, with a lot of honesty, a lot of checking in, a lot of reassessing, and kind of depending on what they're there for individually. It may feel very, very separate, like two totally different cases, if you will, without any. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be the ideal.
Yeah.
Because I've really enjoyed working with them over all these months, and it does appear that their issues are very separate. If I've been meeting with them for about a half a year now, and it hasn't become extremely apparent that they're related, then that tells me that I could very likely move forward in this way without having to blur the lines.
One question that I
Kim, the answer is yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The only sticky point that I would see with that situation would be, what if they suddenly found out after 6 months or 8 months or a year that I had been seeing both of them and I didn't say anything? Or is it okay to just be saying, hey, I didn't know? Or do you operate out of ignorance? Or
I
just didn't see?
I do explain early on when I meet with somebody. Probably the very first things I say out of my mouth are about confidentiality and how it's a safe space, and what's said here doesn't leave here. So I think that they'll, at least I could refer back to that if they did come at me and go, how could you have kept this from me? Because every person I see is a special confidential relationship. And that even includes if I end up seeing family members, and maybe I'll guess I might be in an uncomfortable position to have to explain why I didn't refer either one of them out where I normally would. But yeah, that's something.
But Lisa, I want to remind you along those lines, for peace of mind, is that if someone were to investigate your case and say you didn't handle that appropriately, they're going to say, what would a group of your peers have done in a similar situation? So you're going to have documented this conversation today, and you're going to say, well, let me pull out my file and show you what my peers said about this. These were the issues that we discussed. These were the considerations. I took all this into account, and I either changed my treatment plan or, how I'm handling this case or seeing both of these people, or I didn't. But you're demonstrating that you are getting consultation from therapists who say, yeah, that is a conflict, and I would have done it this way, or I would have done it this way. And then you get to figure out what is the best fit for you and your client.
Yeah, that's peace of mind.
Good. All right. So I had 2 cases, but I don't think we have enough time to do a second one. So what I would like to do is, does anyone have any other thoughts or any other tangents you can imagine? Like, okay, so what if it turned out like we fast forward down the road and this happens? Does anyone have any sort of what ifs they would want to throw out for us to discuss as a group, or any thoughts about anything that was shared?
I will have a what if.
Okay.
What if my younger client, the potential daughter, comes out with having had this huge fight with her mom, and she wants to totally shift from working with me on her work stuff to it, or she if they do divorce, maybe that's like, well, mom did this, dad did this, and this becomes kind of, her family of origin becomes the focus of our therapy. That would definitely blur the lines for me, and I guessing that would be the point where I would consider referring out. It just doesn't feel really good, especially if she's opening up in that way, because she's been fairly superficial about the work stuff and hasn't really gotten into much of the family stuff. And if she were to trust me, that would make it really difficult to think about referring her on. And I'm just hoping that I could handle that situation if it arose kind of by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so again, we come back to the nuances. Do they both know that they're seeing you? Do they not know? It's the hard thing with these cases is they're fictionalized, so we don't have those specific answers. But Lisa, in your scenario, what were you thinking? Do they both know that they're seeing you, or do they not?
I'm thinking they don't, because I'm hoping that I can try to ask do the genogram, get some clarification. And even if I do understand that they are likely related, if their issues are very separate, then I think I might continue to see them. But I do worry that if they don't know I'm seeing each other and something were to happen, that would clearly blur the lines. Mm-hmm. In the moment, that I'd want to make sure I'm responding appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I imagine at that point, you would want to take some time to reflect on what each of their needs are. What point in therapy are they with you? Are they getting close to discharge, one or the other of them? If they don't both know, who would be least harmed by referring out, I guess, would be the way to say that. So all of those nuances would need to be taken into consideration. But it's not a position any of us would want to be in,
And this happens in real life.
I bet.
Wondering, that's
I've
got
had some,
especially when a lot of people, I mean, we have a lot more telehealth now, but I think that in smaller towns, I can imagine that therapists are seeing all kinds of people that know each other and are related, interconnected. So there's got to be some precedent there on how to manage it.
that's a great point, Michelle. And I have to say that I don't live in a really small town. I live in a town, however, that people just seem to be interconnected in ways you'd never understand. But working with therapists in small towns opened my eyes to the nuances that are like, someone will say, I just found out my client goes to the same gym as I, what do I do? And people are like, quit your gym. And someone else is like, it's the only gym for 100 miles. Like, I can't quit my gym. It's a small town. We're used to this, so that context is really important too. So that's a really great point, Michelle.
Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm remembering some discussion of that pre-licensing exam. I believe something of that was addressed. I just don't remember details, but.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions or input or any thoughts about what we discussed so far? So I just want to say, just from my perspective, some of the things that I hope you found helpful were hearing different perspectives, asking some really important clarifying questions before we started jumping in and making assumptions, keeping an open mind that Lisa is a skilled, licensed therapist, and she is going to do the best thing she can for her client. And she's bringing that here. And so she might go in a direction that we wouldn't go ourselves, but we need to respect that she's doing what's best for her and her client. Obviously, nothing overtly illegal or unethical is happening here, which people like to scream about in Facebook groups. But understanding that, just like Michelle said, a small town would look very different than a very big city, that you might make a choice to do this, and down the road, you might need to reassess that choice and say, okay, that was working, but now it is no longer working. And coming to your colleagues and having them say, someone said this early on, that's complicated, Lisa. That's kind of hard. It's hard to be in that position. So getting that support is really super important. Is there any other takeaways anyone has from today? Anything you found especially helpful?
I liked hearing the Genogram and remembering that that's even a tool, because I haven't used it in forever. So that was cool.
Yeah, I do like the Genogram. If I'm going to be totally honest and transparent, I haven't did a Genogram since grad school, which was like a long time ago. And so I probably don't remember, but I did like to hear when Michelle was talking about, the intake process. And I'm thinking my biopsychosocial is it's like 7 pages. So, but that's what I'm used to. And I don't feel I need to change it because I like to get that information before my first session. So I'm not wasting the whole first intake session on that stuff. I could really kind of dive into the core issues and start the goals and the treatment and things of that nature. So I hope my biopsychosocial isn't too intense, but I kind of like it to be that way.
Yeah. And that's a really great point. We all practice in different ways, and depending on who you see might shape the things that you need to know right up front. And there's no way we're going to do all of the things, right? We learned so much in grad school. We're not going to do all the things, but it might be that you leave feeling like, I feel like I'm going to implement this new thing and it's going to make me even more effective as a therapist, or I can understand why they did that, but for my practice, that's not really relevant to me, but it was good to hear that. So I appreciate the respect that people had in sharing that yes, I'm going to do that, or no, I haven't. And I'm okay with that. And we can be okay with that because you know your clients and you know your practice. What else? Does anyone else have any takeaways, any questions, any thoughts?
Thank you. I really love this. I think this is going to be really helpful for us. I'm so glad you put this together. Yeah, it really feels nice. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been highly anxious because I've seen so much bad behavior in Facebook, and I just felt like if I could really frame it the right way, that we could do this. I know those of you on my email list, I sort of threw this out a number of weeks ago, and my question was, can we do it kindly? Because that was my biggest fear. I don't want to be putting something together where people are leaving feeling attacked or discounted in any way.